Is moving pictures underrated? I don't think it's underrated. Good afternoon, everybody, and welcome back to another video with the Monkey Sensing Sensei. And today, I'm gonna be counting down my top 5 most underrated Rush albums. Starting off with number 5, this album comes from Rush's 70s era, their heavily progressive era, just as they're about to enter into the 80s, and that album is 1977's A Farewell to Kings. Now, I picked A Farewell to Kings to start off, mainly because this album has cuts that aren't underrated. Most people love Xanadu, Farewell to Kings, Close to the Heart, one of their first singles, and Cygnus X1, Book 1, that would be continued on Hemispheres. But as a whole, this album to me is extremely underrated, because it's sandwiched in between 2112 and Hemispheres, two of their biggest albums and most acclaimed of their career. But I think it's side 2 where this album specifically shines. I love tracks like Cinderella Man, and I love Madrigal, one of Neil's finest love songs. And if you watch the RushFans deep dive of this album, Donna Halper goes into an amazing explanation of why she loves this song and why this song should have been a hit on the radio. And I think this album, having a little bit of that Ren Fair medieval theming to some of the tracks and just how it sounds, and not being as heavy as 2112 did throw a few people off when this came out. Martin Popoff especially, he went on to say that this album, when it came out, him and his friends were a little disappointed that it wasn't as heavy as 2112, but this album leans more into the progressive side. It's a little more contemplative and just less crazy and all over the place, with the exception of Cygnus X1, Book 1. I love everything from the really awesome album cover art and the thematic elements, and just how the album plays out, from the title track to Xanadu. Just the 2 songs, all you need for side 1. And then flipping it over, I love Closer to the Heart. The great song, one of my personal favorites. Alex's climbing and Victoria's solo. And Cinderella Man, one of my personal favorite Rush songs. I love how it's kind of unorthodox in its structure and the lyrics of about a guy. It's pretty much a motif. It's a play on the movie from the 30s, Mr. Deeds. And I think it's funny how nowadays people think of it as, oh, like the 90s movie. No, not the Adam Sandler movie. The one from the 30s. Madrigal and Cygnus X1 is such an underrated track for me. I love Cygnus X1, one of the heaviest songs they ever made, and one of the first prog metal tracks, along with another couple of songs I'm going to talk about on an album later in the list. All right, moving on to an album that almost never was. And I'm talking about Vapor Trails from 2002. Now, this album almost didn't get made. Towards the end of the 90s, Neil had a lot of tragedies that were happening to him at once. His daughter had passed away in 1997. His wife had passed away from cancer a year after that. And he was just going through a lot of stuff emotionally and mentally. For a good year and a half or so, he took a huge motorcycle ride all the way across the country. It's crazy how far he went. He actually chronicles his ride in his book, Ghost Rider, which I've not read yet, but I plan on buying at some point, and I definitely want to read it. I've heard it's a very great book and a very interesting read. So if any of you guys have checked it out, please let me know in the comments how that book is, and I do want to get that book at some point. But getting back to Vapor Trails as an album, this album is just incredible, and I think it's underrated because people see it as the first really long Rush album. It doesn't have a lot of singles that people would get to know the band for, unless you're a super fan like me. It's just one of those records where people think it doesn't have a lot of bite to it, and it kind of just goes on for too long. But I think the album after this is basically all the things that people say about this, but even more so on that record. I could just feel the emotion and just the overall passion that Neil puts into the lyrics on this album, like with every other Rush album, but just how heavy this album can be and how spiritual it can be. You feel the motorcycle ride and just the emotion on this whole entire record. Even the Fireball, and I have the 2013 remix version on vinyl, as you can see here, and I love the different colors. The original album cover I'll put here. It's great, but I don't think it showcases the emotion. Like, it shows us anger and passion, but I think having the red is almost like anger and just being emotional, and blue is grieving, and then the black is just combining everything together. And it's just an excellent portrait of how this album is. And that continues on the back. You can see Geddy here and Neil are kind of contemplative, But then Alex, as always, is bringing his comedic relief. And I think it's just a great way to showcase the three guys in their emotion and kind of where their heads are at. One Little Victory kicks in with those heavy drums, and Alex's guitar comes in, and it has 2 or 3 riffs right before the lyrics come in, right before Gady comes in with those excellent vocals. And this song to me has always been about just one little victory, living one more day. You have, as long as you're living, you are here. Just enjoy the time that you have. Every day is one little victory. And going into Ceiling Unlimited from One Little Victory is just excellent. I love the bass line that drives this song. And Alex has this really cool riff. I love the solo. The solo is excellent on here. It's very victorious and uplifting. And some of the lyrics I love on here, like Malice Through the Looking Glass. Just very clever lyrics from Neil yet again. And I love the track Ghost Rider, which of course would be Neil's book that he'd write and would release about a year or 2 later from this. And of course, Peaceable Kingdom, Stars Look Down, How It Is, which they bring out at R40. Excellent track that is very much an underrated track on this record, even for people who love this album. I think How It Is and the somewhat title track are very much underrated on this album as a whole. And I think vinyl record 2, side 3 is probably my favorite. You have Secret Touch, Earthshine, and Sweet Miracle. And what a back-to-back punch that is. And I think hearing this album on vinyl is important. Because yes, you gotta flip the record a few times. You have to flip a record. You have to flip 2 records. But I think it's worth it hearing this album on vinyl. You get to hear everything, especially with the remix version. Because as many people know, this came out in 2002. But the original mix was not very good. From what I haven't heard the original mix, but what I've heard from people, it's not very good. It's very tinny, and it's a victim of the loudness wars, essentially, where everything would be just compressed to hell, and everything would be mixed so high up. And that's just a victim, this is just a victim of the CD era and the incoming iTunes and MP3 era, where everything is just mixed to be as loud as possible for the new generation. It kind of ruins it. But this new remix sounds excellent. And you even hear a little extra guitar solo, some guitar bits that you didn't hear in the original version that were brought in for this mix. And I think this mix is excellent. And if you can listen to this album, I'd recommend this mix. Not hearing the original, but the fact that you get bonus stuff on here, and it's the full album the way that the band intended it, almost like the Beatles in their UK releases, I'd recommend this album. And I think this album is heavily underrated by even some people in the fan base. Actually, the next 2 albums are going to be from the 80s. But this one I don't think is as underrated as the next one I'm going to talk about. So I'm going to talk about this one first. And this one is 1984's Grace Under Pressure. If I had to pick one album from Rush's 80s synthwave period, which is Signals going up to Hold Your Fire in 87, so 82 to 87, I would pick this album as my personal favorite. This album has so many great songs on it. I love the singles, I love the deep cuts, just everything clicked with me on this album. Just starting off the opening on this album, just an early warning with the da 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 da. The keyboard sound on this album is phenomenal. This is the album to me where the keys and the guitar and everything is the most balanced. A lot of people argue that on Signals, the keyboards were kind of heavy in the mix and Alex wasn't as prevalent. But this album really fixes that, where they would make the same mistake going forward in the 80s, in the later 80s again. But I think this album is the most balanced of all the synthwave era records. And again, just an early warning, going back to the theme of the Cold War and what was going on in the mid-80s. Ren Leathers is a continuation of that theme, where it's about the Cold War and everyone's scared, and it's a very tumultuous time in the world. I also love Afterimage on here, the song that Neil wrote about one of their friends that worked at Les Studio, Robbie Whalen. It's an excellent, heart-tugging song. It really makes you feel the emotion with the opening keys and the driving force of the song. There's actually no bass on this song, I believe, either. It's just recorded with the keyboards and drums and guitar. There was actually no bass. And I love the music video that has all these images, and it's just very majestic but also sad at the same time. And I love tracks like The Enemy Within and Red Sector A, the latter being about Holocaust survivors in camps. And Geddy actually had asked his mother how it was like in those camps. And she had gone on to say that she didn't know that the real world even existed. Like, she thought everyone was like this. And hearing the song, you can definitely hear that. And that's a testament to Neil's lyrical theming and how a genius he is as a writer. You could picture what's going on in the writer's mind from the song. And it's also a testament to Geddy and Alex being able to put these songs together, and the musical themes and how everything is played and just how dark it is. Side one ends with The Enemy Within, one of my personal favorite Rush songs. I love that police-esque driven bass line. It's very groovy. It's just an excellent song about anxiety and just one's personal mental stability. And side two is no slouch either. The Body Electric, about a robot going sentient and wanting to find, basically wanting to be human. And Kid Gloves. I see Kid Gloves, another reggae-inspired police track. This song is all about bullying. To me, it's almost a precursor to The Pass from Presto that they would release about 5 or so years later. That's also another excellent track that I would recommend checking out. But I love Kid Gloves. Red Lenses, again, going back to that Cold War dichotomy and how everyone was just scared and it was a really tense time for the world, not just for US or Russia, but for everybody. And the album ends with one of my favorite songs, Between the Wheels. This is the heaviest song on the record. It starts off with those foreboding keys. Dun, 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 dun. Alex comes in with that dark shredding guitar work. Oh, it is gorgeous. And again, I love the lyrics here. Brother, can you spare another war? Another lost generation. It's just a dark track to end the record. But this album is dark already. But it's a great song to end an already dark and amazing Rush album. The next album on my list, number 2, is going to be an album that is also a part of the synthwave era from 1987, and that is Hold Your Fire. Now, before I get into the actual album, I want to tell a story about this record. I went to Newbury Comics one day, not expecting to buy this. I went there, not a lot of money, and I went thinking, like, I want to buy something. But all the records there were pretty expensive for newer pressings, because I buy a lot of newer pressings. I don't buy a lot of original copies. And I'll get into that someday on a separate video. But I went in there, I saw this at first. I'm like, Hold Your Fire, I'm not really a fan. You know, I own a lot of the Rush albums I want to get, minus a few that are out of print and way up there in price. But my wife and I wanted to go eat something, and I'm like, I don't want to leave empty-handed. So I was like, you know what? Hell with it. I'm going to buy this record. It's only $30, and this is the quality record pressing, 200 grams from 2015. And I know it's from 2015 because the inside actually has the download code that says it expires in 2016. So this is a 2015 200 gram pressing, and I'm actually proud to own this now. But at the time, I was not really into this album. But let me tell you, when I put this album on the turntable, and you hear songs like Force 10, with the mechanics in the beginning. The beginning of the song has these mechanics and do. It's very 80s, but then you have Geddy's bass line and Neil's excellent drum beat. Do. Great way to open up this record. Tough times demand tough songs, demand tough hearts. And I might have said that in out of order, but I love the lyrics to this song too. It's just an excellent way to start off the record. And even to this day, that song is very prevalent. And of course, Time Stands Still, I love, one of my favorite Rush songs, featuring guest vocals from Amy Mann. She was a great addition to this song. And if you want a little laugh, I check out the music video for this song because it's very much 80s cheese, but it's an excellent music video nonetheless. And it's one of my favorite Rush songs. I think this song is excellent. They'd actually go on to name their last documentary, Time Stands Still, that would document the R40 tour and kind of the band's ending period, if you will. But then you have more deep cuts on here, like Open Secrets with Alex's excellent guitar work opening it up. And this is one of those albums where Alex is kind of buried a little bit, but at this point, between Power Windows and this album, Alex, instead of playing these dynamic, huge solos, he had to find out where to put himself in the mix, because he was not only competing with the bass and the drums, but he was also competing with the keyboards as well. Because at this time, he actually had a bunch of keyboards and electronica elements, I should say. So, because Neil had electronica elements on his drums, Geddy had his synths and his bass, and then, of course, Alex had his little fuzz tone pedal and everything else. So he was competing with a bunch of different electronica elements. So he had to pick and choose his spots, but I love the guitar work on this album. I love the solos. I mean, songs like Lock and Key. Oh, what a great song that is. I Don't Want to Face the Killer Instinct. That's how it opens the song, with these excellent keyboard flourishes. I love it. And the bass, too. I love songs like Mission and Turn the Page. Again, a little kind of a funky bass line driven song. I love it. And I love the closer, High Water. Oh, excellent mid-pace song to really end the album out. It ends it in a nice sort of wave, like a nice wave crashing. Not like a huge wave, but just like a tide going in and out. It's great. And I even like Tai Shan, one of Rush's most contested songs of like their worst songs ever. No Rush is bad Rush, but if I had to pick a worst song, I'd probably pick Tai Shan. But I actually like this song quite a bit, and I think it fits good as the penultimate track. The last two tracks are kind of more mid-pace. They slow the album down very well after the funky and upbeat turn the page. If you slacked off Rush's 80s synthwave era, especially this album, I would give this album another listen. You might just find something you like. All right, everybody, my number one most underrated Rush album. We're going all the way back to 1975, and it's not Fly By Night. It's the other album that they'd released a few months later that same year. And of course, I'm talking about the underrated, killer, heavy, almost progressive metal stylings of Caress of Steel. This album kicks so much ass. I love this record to death. It's actually one of my personal favorite Rush albums. But when this album came out, a lot of people didn't get it. This was 1975, so by then prog was kind of on the downturn. You still had Pink Floyd with Wish You Were Here, and they would have great albums going into the future, but a lot of bands like King Crimson and Genesis, a lot of those bands were kind of out of favor, and even Styx, they were getting a little out of favor by this point. It was a lot of Thin Lizzy and Foreigner and Boston around this time that were really starting to get big, and Kiss were still obviously huge, and Aerosmith, too. A lot of people didn't really want 20-minute long, 10-minute long epics. They wanted heavy, fast, great arena rock. But what this album delivers for me is a rockin', heavy, probably the first progressive metal albums ever. And it's just one of those albums where once you hear it, and if you like this kind of stuff, you're going to be a fan for life. Because this album is just a Bastille Day, with one of Geddy's best bass riffs and one of the heaviest all these guys would ever write about the French Revolution. And then I think I'm going bald. More of a silly song, which the story of the origin of this song is kind of all over the place. But to me, it's almost like a little bit of a jab or a little bit of poking fun at the Kiss song Going Blind. But I actually like this song a lot more. A, because it's produced a lot better by the amazing Terry Brown. But also because I love Geddy's vocals on here. I love the solo that kind of sounds like the guitar is laughing in the song. It's a very silly song, but it definitely alleviates the dark tone of this album, because this album is very dark. You have songs like The Fountain of Lamb Neth, which is a song I'm going to get into in a little bit, and then The Necromancer, two very dark tracks. And even Bastille Day is kind of dark, but I think I'm going bald is a bright spot on this otherwise dark album. Before discussing any of the music, though, I really want to talk about the album cover itself. This was the first album cover to be designed by Hugh Syme, who'd go on to design every other album cover for the band going forward, starting with this album all the way up to Clockwork Angels. Lakeside Park is just an amazing track. I love how whimsical it is, how magical it is. It's a song about aging. Like, again, I think I'm going bald is about aging. Those two songs fit so well together on this album. And that goes swimmingly into The Necromancer. This song has this really cool narration from Neil Peart. Again, people wonder, is the song be better if it didn't have it? I don't really mind it. I mean, the rest of the song is kick-ass. Alex has some bluesy solos on this album, too. And what I love about this album is that it's kind of the last time that Rush would make an album that's more on the bluesy hard rock side. They would be the bluesy flourishes here and there. 2112 would have a couple moments like that, too, on side 2. But I think this is the last time that Rush wrote songs in that kind of first album or Fly By Night sort of vein. But the song that most people are conflicted with, because remember, side 1 is pretty basic minus the Necromancer. It's about 10 or so minutes, but the first side is pretty normal. But the song that everyone talks about is The Fountain of Lamb Neth. Now, people either love this song or they don't like it at all, or they only like a couple parts. But I love every part of this song. It's excellent. Now, is it as good as 2112? I don't think so. It is a little, it doesn't connect as well as 2112. This feels more like 6 separate parts as opposed to 2112 feeling like one whole piece. But that being said, I still love this song. And again, the bluesy licks and the solos. And I love the theme of this song where you get the it's repeated throughout various points of the song, but it really helps tell the story of a guy who living his life. He wants to find a fountain of Lamneth. He goes on this epic journey. He meets a woman on some island. She wants him to settle down. He doesn't want to. He wants to keep traveling, keep going. He goes on the journey again. He eventually finds the fountain and finds out, oh, it's just a fountain. And then he's old. And then the very end of the song, it continues that theme of, I'm here, I'm born, but the guy's obviously dead. He dies at the end. So it's a very melancholy song and a very dark song to close out the record. But I think it's Fountain of Lamneth is one of the best songs these guys ever made. And honestly, if you're a fan of prog metal, if you're a fan of even heavy metal, and you don't mind listening to one or two longer tracks, I would give this album a shot, because side A alone is worth it. But Fountain of Lamneth, to me, is an uncovered gem in their discography. Alright everyone, thank you so much for watching this video, and if you made it to the end, please make sure you swing on over to that subscribe button, hit the like button to show that you like my videos, hit that notification bell so that way you can get notified when videos are uploaded to the channel, so you can swing on over and watch them as well. And with that being said, what are your guys' most underrated Rush albums? Let me know in the comment section below, and we can get a discussion going. This is always a heated topic amongst Rush fans. Whether an album is underrated, overrated, decent, good. To me, all Rush is good Rush, but I always love hearing people's opinions on what's underrated in their catalog and what's some of their favorite albums that many people may not like in the Rush fans community. And before I go, I'd like to shout out Rush Fans here on YouTube. It's run by Ryan Murphy, and they do a show called Rush Roundtable, where they'll discuss albums, songs, special guests on. One of my favorites being Donna Halper, who discovered Rush in the 70s with Working Man. A lot of Rush fans will know that. But they have interesting discussions about songs, albums. They talk about the covers, how some of the songs were written. Just excellent stuff. And I appear on a couple of roundtables. So if you'd like to check that out, I'm going to leave a link to that channel in the description as well. Alright, I want to thank everyone for watching today's video. I hope everyone has a great day. Remember, listen to Rush, and don't forget to keep meditating with vinyl.